I can't help but notice. Lance started the morning with some nice, easy blues, and we've gradually progressed into some harder rock throughout the morning.
Got to jam it out.
Keep going. Yeah, after the loss of an hour's sleep over the weekend.
Well, and this money talks too, so we're giving our next guest.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I didn't even put that tie-in together. Mornings with Richard Cross. Richard is on vacation this week. My name's Scott Sands. You can find me on X at Scott Sands Media, The Scott Sands Show on Facebook. C-Spire text line is open at 601-879-4395. Just did a quick look at the markets a few minutes after the opening bell, and we are red again. Looks like the Dow and NASDAQ are both down about 400, S&P off 87, and the Russell down a little bit as well. But I do see some green candles coming up, so we'll keep an eye on that, I'm sure, throughout the day. On Friday, President Trump signed his executive order to create a crypto strategic reserve. And I'm curious what this all means. I know just enough about crypto to get me in trouble. That's why I called on an expert, Natalie Brunell, host of Coin Stories, the podcast, and also TalkingBitcoin.com, is joining me. Natalie, it's great to have you on. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Let's just kind of start with the basics. What is Bitcoin? How did it start? Why are people putting money into this?
Bitcoin is the hardest, scarcest asset that exists. It's the best engineered form of money. It has a finite cap of 21 million coins, and it's an open source protocol that is completely decentralized. And so far, it's the best performing asset of the last decade. So to me, I see it as a savings technology, the best way to take the money I earn and save it in something that can't be manipulated or inflated. And I'm really excited that so many people are now paying attention to Bitcoin because of what the White House is doing.
Yeah, I'm paying attention to it a little bit too late. I heard about it. I'm kind of a tech guy. I heard about it when it was in the hundreds of dollars and just didn't trust it. I didn't know enough about it at the time. Could have bought it then. Could have bought at $10, $15, $20,000. And I thought, well, I'm not sure I want to put $20K into, or even buy a fraction of it into something that I can't hold in my hand. It's not currency. It's not gold. It's not silver. It's not even a stock certificate. It made me sketchy, and now I have a serious FOMO. I fear of missing out on what's happening.
Well, I can relate. I mean, everyone who hears about Bitcoin for the first time dismisses it. They're skeptical. I totally understand. I was there as well. And the longer that you study this asset and study the history of the monetary system, you start to gain more and more conviction, and your percentage of how much you hold in terms of your portfolio begins to increase. So it takes us all a little bit of time, but there are so many people who have made 180s and now are big believers in Bitcoin.
So as Bitcoin became successful and grew, other coins were created, Doge and Shiba, and I mean there are literally thousands of coins now that are doing well, and some people are making money. Some have had their rug pulled from them, but now how do you know which ones are legitimate?
Well, I like to make a clear distinction between Bitcoin and crypto because Bitcoin is the only one that has no issuer. It's an asset with no issuer. It is a true commodity, and it is truly decentralized. Everything else involves a lot more risk, in my opinion. I think it's a lot more speculative. They reflect digital equities much more than digital commodities. And so I think that there still needs to be a little bit more clarity with regards to how to really evaluate these different assets. Are they digital securities? What defines a utility token? And I think this administration is moving forward to take steps to give us some sort of a framework. But again, I only invest in Bitcoin because to me, it's actually the most conservative investment that I can make.
TalkingBitcoin.com is her website. Host of Coin Stories, the podcast, Natalie Brunell. So the Crypto Strategic Reserve, this should give it even more legitimacy.
Yes. Well, in the spirit of the Trump administration, auditing everything and accounting for every dollar, I think it was time to audit our Bitcoin as well. The U.S. holds around 200,000 Bitcoin from forfeitures and seizures. So it's really only logical, right, that we decide how to handle those assets strategically. And I think Trump made a very smart move by choosing not to sell more Bitcoin. We've already missed out on massive gains by selling it in the past. So this order not only pledges to hold the Bitcoin that we have, but it also says that the government is going to examine how it might might acquire more Bitcoin through revenue neutral strategies. And I've got a few ideas on how to make that happen if you want to talk about that. But what I thought was remarkable is that the order highlighted Bitcoin scarcity, that with only 21 million coins, it's a good idea for the US to be among the first nations to create a reserve like this. And then separately, there's a digital asset stockpile, which consists of other tokens also acquired through forfeitures, but the government said it can sell those assets. So that's interesting because the White House is effectively saying, hey, don't sell your Bitcoin, but it's not saying that about any other cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what I was expecting from this, and I think many people may have been as well, is that the presidential order would be to buy Bitcoin. But that's not the plan necessarily right away. And with the scarcity, there was some talk that might drive the price of Bitcoin up. But it seems like the president's going to be looking for other ways to acquire the Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of investors were disappointed that we're not going to be going out there and printing money to buy Bitcoin. But I do think that Bitcoin can be acquired through revenue neutral ways. I mean, we can sell buildings that no one uses and invest the proceeds in Bitcoin. There's talk of revaluing the gold on our balance sheet to reflect today's prices. And so with some simple accounting, use that to buy Bitcoin. We can say, hey, no capital gains tax if you pay your federal taxes in Bitcoin. And then once we have Bitcoin, I mean, we could get very creative. We could issue credit mixed with Bitcoin. We could issue bonds that are backed by Bitcoin. I mean, there's so many ways that I think Bitcoin will eventually be integrated into the financial system, but we're just not there yet.
If the government or any investor is not going to sell the Bitcoin, it's really unrecognized gains at that point, correct? Because you're never really taking the profit out.
Sure, but it's not any different from other assets that people hold, right? The real estate that they borrow against, the gold that's on our balance sheet right now, even equities. A lot of times people hold and then sometimes use that as pristine collateral, which we really see. Bitcoiners feel very strongly that in the future, Bitcoin will serve as the bedrock for the global economy and be used as pristine collateral and as really digital capital.
There are some people, I know that there are stories from the early days of Bitcoin where you could buy a pizza with Bitcoin, and that pizza today would cost you $100,000 because of the increase in the value of Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin being used more and more transactionally? Is that a smart thing to do?
It is being used as a medium of exchange, but here in the West, where we have our traditional 60-40 portfolio, most people are choosing to save in Bitcoin. They spend their fiat, which is depreciating and consistently getting debased, and they save in Bitcoin. Now, if you zoom out and look globally, there are a lot of places where Bitcoin is being used as a payment rail, as a tool to subvert oppressive governments, as a tool for human rights. It is allowing people in developing nations to connect to the global economy and earn Bitcoin and empower themselves economically. And that's one of the most inspiring aspects of Bitcoin because it is available to 8 billion people. And so the total addressable market is really larger than any other asset that exists. And it's empowering a lot of people to be able to save for the very first time and to be able to engage with one another in a way that's free without intermediaries and counterparty risk the way our current financial system is set up.
So address the risks for us because it is decentralized. Is there a risk? Obviously, it could go down in value, but what's the safety net? What's protecting it? Could Bitcoin go away tomorrow?
Well, I would say that once you reach a $2 trillion market cap, it's very difficult for an asset to suddenly disappear. It's an open source protocol. That question to me sounds like, well, what if the internet went away tomorrow? It's very, very difficult once a network is sufficiently distributed like Bitcoin to get rid of it everywhere all at once. Yeah. So even if there are countries that say decide to have more authoritarian approaches to Bitcoin, or they want to shut down Bitcoin, you can't do that at the same time everywhere around the world because it literally just relies on being able to hook up to the internet. So as long as there's the ability for us to connect electronically, then Bitcoin will exist. And that's one of the most empowering ways, because if you think of the internet, like Bitcoin is the internet of money. The internet has changed how we communicate, how we interact in terms of our economy. We buy most things online, and Bitcoin's going to allow us to send value across the world in a much more frictionless way than our current system right now.
And that's why I could talk to you all day about this. I've got so many questions, and the fear that I've missed out on this. I've subscribed to the podcast. It's Coin Stories. Natalie Brunell, talkingbitcoin.com. Quickly, I've got less than a minute here, Natalie. Bitcoin's dropped in value by about 25%, $20,000, $30,000 in the last couple of months. Any quick insight onto what's happening?
Well, there are always so many factors impacting Bitcoin's short-term price. I mean, what you said with the reserve, some investors were hoping for Trump to announce a big buying spree. That didn't happen. But the bigger story, I think, is just all the uncertainty when you look at the macro and geopolitical landscape. And right now, Bitcoin, unfortunately, still trades alongside a lot of risk-on assets because people just don't understand it. And we have to remember that Bitcoin, again, is in its earliest days as a global macro asset. Its market cap is only $2 trillion. It's highly liquid, trades 24/7. So it does feel the waves of market tensions much more aggressively than the larger asset classes. But remember, despite Bitcoin's volatility, long-term holders have outperformed pretty much every traditional investment by holding Bitcoin, including real estate, bonds, the S&P 500. So don't be scared by the volatility.
Natalie Brunell, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. TalkingBitcoin.com.
Thank you for having me.